Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of Daily IoT. On today's episode, I want to talk about continuing my progress on working on the firmware. So, as I mentioned a couple episodes back, when I wasn't getting a ton of work done, I had sort of stalled out on the firmware. And part of that was because I was waiting for the hardware to get finalized and finished up, because I've been doing all my prototyping on a particle photon, which has been great, and I've been proving out things like the screen and the flow and all those things, connecting out to a web service and stuff like that. However, it's not, I won't be using a photon in my end product, and there are some differences between the photon and the P1 module. Specifically, as I also talked about in another episode, all that extra flash memory that you have access to and some things like that. And so I had sort of eased off of working on the firmware until I got an actual alpha version of my hardware to play with, so I could actually know that the code I was writing, I wouldn't need to change later for some reason because of some subtle difference between the P1 and the photon. But as I was sitting there thinking about this one day and thinking about how, man, I'm not getting anything done on this, I said, what I really need is just some dev P1 hardware that I could continue to write firmware for. And the problem with just buying a P1 module is that it's really a surface mount, and it's not a real breadboard. I mean, it's not real breadboard friendly. It's completely not breadboardable by itself. It's got pads on the bottom, and it's just not really something that you're going to mess around even soldering. I mean, you could probably get away with soldering little wires too, but that sounded like a big hassle. And I was like, if only there was a development board that had a P1 module on it. Duh, Sparkfun. I knew about this. I had seen this before. The Sparkfun Photon Redboard, I think is what it's called, is literally just an example P1 schematic based on the P1 data sheet that they say this is how you could hook things up. It's got the RGB LED, the two buttons here, it's got the D7 LED, and it's got a P1 module right here, and a micro USB, and you can power it from a barrel jack thing and whatnot. And so I was like, geez, I just need to order one of these and start messing around with it and start programming on it. And so that is what I did. I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner. Duh. And so I've got my P1 test bed now that I can take my firmware and use it to program this, see if there's any differences, and work through that. And so that is what I am doing now. I've actually run into a hurdle with this, a blocker, in that I can't use my Docker environment to create a binary that I can program this, which is really weird. When you make locally through the GNU ARM toolset that I set up previously, you give it a platform specifier. So you say platform equals photon, and it'll build a binary output that you can program the photon with. All that worked perfectly. I was debugging. You've seen that video. But when I changed the platform to be P1, I was getting DFU programming errors when I tried to program it. It would say, hey, I'm expecting a P1 binary, but you gave me a photon binary, even though I was specifying the P1 as the output of the build. And so I'm not sure what's going on there. I've got an issue out on the forum to see if somebody can help me with that. But funny enough, the cloud compile, when you specify P1 as a platform, does work. And so that's obviously calling a build script differently than they've documented for local makefile building. And so that's where I'm at. I've got a P1 development board. I don't know why it took me so long to get one of these. And so I'm still developing firmware, testing things out that should more seamlessly. My hardware is going to be a lot like this. It's going to be obviously shaped different to fit inside a puck, but the basic concept of the things that you need to hook up to this, very similar. Add the e-paper display. And so this is a great way to test my firmware, moving away from the photon so that I'm closer to what my final hardware will be. And so, which hopefully final hardware is not too far out, at least something that I can test with, hopefully get into layout this week, and then have a couple of them printed up and assembled. And so I will definitely keep you posted on that. But in the meantime, we're going to be using this guy to do our firmware development. And so that's the update for today. Question of the day: what is your favorite maker development board? It could be an Arduino, it could be an SB board, it could be a particle photon. What's your favorite development board for creating maker projects? Stick it in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you hit that subscribe button, again, as always, please send me an email, kevin@sidwar.com, so I can get to know you a little bit better. Otherwise, until next time, thanks so much for watching Daily IoT, the show where together we're learning how to make the Internet of Things one day at a time.